All right, get ready, because today we're going deep on this Philippine Supreme Court case, and it really gets you thinking about, individual rights and how much power law enforcement should have.
Yeah, definitely.
It's the case is People versus Gabiosa Sr.
Yeah.
And what's really cool is we have excerpts straight from the Supreme Court's decision.
Oh, wow.
So we're getting it right from the source.
That's great.
And just the fact that it went all the way to the Supreme Court,
Right.
that tells you right there. This
Right.
is some serious stuff.
Absolutely.
There are some big legal questions at stake here.
Yeah. So in this case, a search warrant was issued, and it was against this guy, Roberto Gabiosa Sr.
Okay.
And he fought back.
Right.
He said it wasn't valid.
Of course.
But the lower courts, they didn't side with him.
Okay.
But then the Court of Appeals did.
Oh, wow.
So it went up to the Supreme Court.
So that's kind of the background.
Right.
But the core of what we're looking at today is this question of probable cause. Did the judge who issued this warrant, did they actually have enough evidence
Right.
to justify, you're basically saying,
Yeah.
we're going into this guy's property.
Exactly. It's a big deal.
We're going to search it.
Yeah, you can't just do that.
This is huge.
And that's where, like, the Fourth Amendment in the U.S. Constitution comes in.
Right.
And they have similar things
Mm-hmm.
in other countries, too.
Yeah.
It's all about protecting people from unreasonable searches.
Okay, so let's get into Gabiosa's argument here.
Okay.
He's saying that the judge didn't personally examine both the police officer who applied for the warrant
Right.
and the witness who said they saw drug dealing firsthand.
Okay.
And the Court of Appeals agreed with him.
Yeah, so basically what happened was the Court of Appeals really focused on the specific wording in the Philippine Constitution.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the part about examining the applicant and the witness, it uses the word and.
Okay.
And they interpreted that very literally.
Mm.
Like, both people have to be questioned every time, no exceptions.
Seriously?
Yeah.
They made their decision based on one word.
Pretty much.
That seems, a little strict, maybe?
Yeah, you're not the only one who thinks
Okay.
that the Supreme Court, they weren't happy about it.
Really?
They looked at a bunch of older cases,
Uh-huh.
some even going back to like the 1930s,
Oh, wow.
to try to figure out what the intention was behind this part of the Constitution.
Okay.
And they said the main point is to make sure the judge has enough info to decide if there's probable cause.
Right.
It's not about always rigidly questioning both people.
Okay, so they're saying don't get caught up in the little words.
Right.
Look at the bigger picture here.
Exactly.
But how did that actually play out in this case?
Well, in Gabiosa's case, the police officer who filed the warrant, he wasn't even involved in the investigation. He was just doing the paperwork.
Okay.
The real info was with the officer who did the surveillance and the light test by.
So questioning that first officer wouldn't have given the judge any new info.
Exactly. It would have been a waste of time.
Okay, so they're basically saying, come on, use some common sense here.
Yeah, pretty much.
The judge already had good evidence from that other officer.
Right.
So the Court of Appeals really got stuck on that one little word and
It seems that way.
missed the bigger picture.
Yes.
So they overturned a warrant that the Supreme Court said was actually okay.
Uh-huh.
That's a big deal.
It shows how legal interpretation isn't always so clear-cut.
Right.
Judges have to think about the situation, the intent,
Yeah.
and even look at how the law has been used in the past.
And the Court of Appeals, they made it another mistake too, right?
Oh, yeah, they did.
Not just the and thing.
Right.
They also said the judge's questions weren't tough enough.
Yeah, they wanted the judge to be, like, super intense,
Right.
like grilling the witness.
Like some kind of detective.
Yeah, almost.
So did the Supreme Court agree with that?
Actually, no. They looked at the questions and said the judge was thorough enough. They said he did his job.
Okay.
He confirmed the officer saw the drug dealing firsthand, knew specific details about it,
Okay.
and wasn't just relying on rumors.
So the Supreme Court said the judge was careful.
Right.
He didn't just blindly believe the officer.
Exactly.
So we've got the Court of Appeals making two big mistakes here.
Mm-hmm.
First, getting hung up on the word and
Yeah.
second, wanting the judge to be some kind of super sleuth.
Right.
But both times the Supreme Court said, nope, the judge did it right.
Yep.
This is already getting pretty interesting.
It is, and we're just getting started.
I know, right?
This case brings up some really big questions about individual rights versus effective law enforcement.
It makes you think, how much weight should we give to the exact words of a law versus what it was meant to do?
That's a great point.
It's tricky. Where do we draw the line?
Definitely something to think about.
Yeah, for sure. But before we go too deep into that,
Okay.
let's take a step back.
Yeah.
And remember what happened to Gabiosa himself.
Right.
Did he just get away with everything because of these legal technicalities?
Well, not exactly. Remember, the Supreme Court reversed what the Court of Appeals decided.
Oh, right.
They went back to the original ruling and said the search warrant was valid.
Okay.
So all the evidence they found during the search, that was allowed in court.
Gotcha.
And they could continue the case against Gabiosa.
So the Supreme Court really wanted to make it clear that in this specific situation, the warrant was justified.
Right.
And the search was legal.
They weren't messing around.
No, they weren't. But this isn't just about Gabiosa.
You got it.
I mean, this is going to affect other cases too, right?
Absolutely. It sets a precedent for how future search warrant cases will be handled.
So it's clarifying how much scrutiny judges should use when they're looking at these warrant applications. And they're saying it's about the evidence itself.
Yeah.
Not just how the questions are asked.
Okay. That's important for anyone in law enforcement.
Right.
Or criminal justice.
For sure.
But what about the rest of us?
Why should we care about this case?
It's about privacy.
Oh, okay.
Which is something we all care about.
Right.
The Fourth Amendment and all those similar protections around the world.
Yeah.
They exist to make sure our homes, our stuff, is protected from the government. Just barging in.
So this case is a reminder that our rights are always being tested.
Yeah, and reinterpreted by the courts.
It's making me think about probable cause differently.
How so?
It's not just a legal term.
Right.
It's about the foundation of our privacy.
Exactly.
And judges, they have so much power.
They do?
Their decisions, they affect our lives.
For sure.
So we need to understand how they make those decisions.
Absolutely.
This is really thought-provoking.
It is, isn't it?
And we're just getting started.
I know, right?
We're going to go even deeper after a quick break.
Sounds good.
Stay with us. So we've seen that the Supreme Court wasn't really on board with how the Court of Appeals handled this case.
Yeah, they definitely had some issues with their reasoning.
But this whole thing makes me think about the tough job that courts have. It's like they're trying to balance two really important things.
Right. On one hand, you have the individual's right to privacy. Like, that's a big deal.
Right. It's in the Constitution.
It's fundamental.
But then you also have to let law enforcement do their jobs.
Yeah, they have to be able to investigate crimes. And, sometimes that means they need to look into someone's private life.
So it's this constant back and forth.
It's a delicate balance.
If you go too far one way, you end up with basically a police state where anyone can be searched for no reason.
Yeah, that's not good.
But if you go too far the other way, then criminals can get away with stuff because the police can't get the evidence they need.
Exactly. It's a tough spot to be in.
That's why these cases like this Gabiosa one are so important.
Yeah, they help us figure out where the lines are.
Okay, so let's talk about probable cause. Because that's what this whole thing hinges on.
It's the key ingredient.
I think most people have a general idea of what it means, but...
Right. Can you break it down for us, like in simple terms?
Sure. So imagine you're baking a cake.
Okay. I love a good cake analogy.
You need the right ingredients.
Right.
Flour, sugar, eggs.
Of course.
You can't just throw anything in there.
And hope for the best.
Right. Exactly. So, probable, because it's kind of like those ingredients. It's the evidence that the police need to convince a judge that a search is justified.
Okay.
It can't be just a hunch or a feeling.
Yeah, you can't just say, I think something fishy's going on.
Nope. There has to be something concrete. Something that would make a reasonable person think, yep, there's probably evidence of a crime at that location.
So you got to have those hard facts to back it up.
Right. Like in Gabiosa's case, the Supreme Court said the officer's testimony, that was enough.
Okay.
He saw the drug dealing firsthand.
Right.
He knew details about the place, the people involved.
And
he wasn't just repeating rumors.
So they're basically saying the judge had all the right ingredients to make this probable cause cake.
Exactly. Perfect analogy.
I like it. But let's go back to the Court of Appeals for a second.
Okay.
Because they didn't just mess up with the and the whole judge's interrogator thing.
Oh, there's more.
They also had a problem with the wording of the search warrant itself.
Really? What was wrong with it?
It said they were looking for undetermined quantity of shabu and or drug paraphernalia.
Okay.
And the Court of Appeals thought that was too vague. Like, it didn't say exactly what they were searching for.
So they're saying it's like getting a warrant to search for stuff.
Yeah, basically way too broad.
Too much wiggle room.
Exactly. They thought it gave the police too much power to just go through everything without any clear limits.
But of course, the Supreme Court didn't agree with that either, right?
Nope. They said that while it's better to be specific in warrants, sometimes you just can't be.
Okay.
Like with illegal drugs, you don't always know how much or what type you're dealing with beforehand.
So you can't always predict what you're going to find.
Exactly. The Supreme Court said undetermined quantity of shabu and or drug paraphernalia. That was specific enough.
Okay.
It told the police what they could and couldn't look for.
So once again, the Supreme Court's being practical.
Right.
They're saying the law has to be flexible sometimes to deal with real-life situations.
It can't be a rigid rule book.
It's not always black and white.
Exactly. That's what makes legal interpretation so interesting.
Right. It's about applying those principles to messy real-life situations.
And figuring out how it all fits together.
This case really shows how important judicial discretion is.
Absolutely.
Judges have to weigh all these different factors, the nuances of each case,
Right.
and then make a decision based on how they understand the law.
It's big responsibility.
And those decisions, they have real consequences.
For sure, they affect people's lives.
Not just the people in that specific case, but also how the law is understood and applied in the future.
Yeah, it's a ripple effect.
It makes me wonder about the judges themselves.
What do you mean?
What kind of pressures do they face?
Oh, that's a good question.
I mean, they're not dealing with legal principles in a vacuum.
Right.
They're dealing with real people.
In real life situations.
And this case, it touches on some pretty sensitive topics.
For sure. Drugs, privacy police powers.
I bet those judges get a lot of scrutiny.
Especially in high-profile cases like this one.
Yeah, from the public, the media, everyone's watching.
And it's not just public scrutiny either.
Oh, what else?
They have to operate within this whole complex legal system.
Right.
With all these layers of past rulings, different interpretations, and then society's values are always changing too.
It's a lot to juggle.
It really is.
But that's what makes it so fascinating, right?
I think so.
It's this constant process of figuring things out.
Interpretation, debate, refinement.
And cases like this Gabiosa one, they give us a glimpse into how that works.
Yeah, and how those interpretations end up shaping how we live.
I'm starting to see the legal system in a whole new light.
That's great to hear.
It's so much more complex than I thought.
It's not just about memorizing laws.
No.
It's about understanding how they're used in real life.
How their interpreted challenge changed over time.
Exactly.
So we've talked about how the Supreme Court disagreed with the Court of Appeals.
What?
And we've talked about the whole idea of probable cause.
The key ingredient.
And how judges have this tough job of balancing different interests.
Right. It's a delicate balance.
But before we move on to our final thoughts on this case,
Okay.
I'm curious to hear what those are.
I'm ready.
But first, we're going to take a quick break.
Sounds good.
We'll be right back to wrap things up and talk about the lasting impact of this Gabiosa case, so don't go anywhere. All right, we're back and ready to finish up our look at People versus Gabiosa Sr.
It's been quite a deep dive.
We've covered a lot of ground.
We have.
From the nitty-gritty of that search warrant to the bigger picture of how judges interpret the law.
Yeah, it really makes you think.
This case has definitely made me realize just how complicated the legal system is.
It is complex.
You know, it shows how even something small, like the word "and" in a legal document, can lead to these huge arguments about individual rights versus law enforcement.
Yeah, it's all about finding that balance.
And it shows that judges have to make some really tough calls.
They do.
I mean, they're weighing different ways to understand the law and thinking about what their decisions will mean for real people.
It's a heavy responsibility.
So, as we wrap up, what are some of the big takeaways from this case?
Well, one thing that really stands out is that the law isn't set in stone.
Okay.
It changes over time through how judges interpret it and how society's values change.
Yeah, that makes sense. If we were stuck with just the literal meaning of every law,
Right.
we wouldn't be able to adapt to new situations.
Exactly. Another key point is the importance of context.
Okay.
Judges can't just apply the law blindly.
Right.
They have to think about the facts of each case, what the law was meant to do, and the impact their decisions will have.
Like in the Gabiosa case where the Supreme Court said undetermined quantity of shabu was specific enough.
Yeah, even though the Court of Appeals thought it was too vague.
They were being realistic. They knew that demanding total specificity in every warrant would make it harder for law enforcement to do their jobs.
Especially when they don't know exactly what they're looking for beforehand.
So it's all about striking that balance between protecting individual rights and making sure law enforcement can be effective.
Exactly. And that brings us to the third big takeaway, judicial discretion.
Okay.
Judges have to use their judgment to interpret the law in a way that protects individual freedoms, but also considers what's best for society as a whole.
That's a tough balancing act.
It really is. It's like walking a tightrope.
Trying to find that sweet spot where everything works out fairly.
But it's a crucial role for judges.
They're like the guardians of the Constitution.
Yeah, making sure our rights are protected.
And they have to keep up with how society's views are changing.
The law is a living thing.
This whole conversation has been eye-opening.
I'm glad.
It's made me realize how much goes into every legal decision.
Yeah, it's not simple.
And how those decisions affect all of us.
They do?
People versus Gabiosa Sr. might seem like just one case.
Right.
But it touches on these really important issues.
It shows us that the law is constantly changing through interpretation and debate.
And that we as citizens, we have a part to play in that too.
We do, by paying attention to these issues, understanding how court decisions affect us, and participating in the conversation about law and justice.
Well said. Thanks. This has been a fascinating deep dive.
I agree.
Thanks for joining us as we explored this Philippine law case.
It was my pleasure.
It's been great having you here to break it all down for us.
Anytime.
Until next time, keep those legal minds sharp.
Will do.
And remember, the law is all around us. It shapes our lives in so many ways.
It does.
So stay curious, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep.